Well, thank you all for coming. I'm Ben Katz. I'm the political director for Open San Diego. Open San Diego is the local affiliate of Code for America. We help government and nonprofit organizations use technology better. Here with Carl DeMaio, a former city council member and candidate for Congress. Carl, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Looking forward to a really good conversation about technology and the potentials it holds for government. I think we have a lot of common experiences, and I think it's going to be a great conversation.
Well, this is a topic I'm really passionate about, and it's not a partisan topic. I mean, we can disagree on policy. We can actually even disagree on priorities of problems that we want to tackle. But we should agree that government should be open and accessible, that people have the right to know what information government has, what records government keeps, and what was the basis for decisions. And open government should always be seen as an American issue, not a Democrat or a Republican issue. And, you know, when you take a look at the issue of technology, obviously it's one of the major ingredients for open government. Technology can be a powerful platform for making information more accessible. But it's also something that links up to government efficiency. You can embrace technology to deliver services. In the 1990s, I was active in promoting the Clinger-Cohen Act, which was, you think about it, it's like, you know, technology floaties for government, where we said to every government agency, we want you to have a chief information officer. We want you to have information technology plans. We want to talk about, you know, what you're spending on technology and how does that relate to your core business and how you're going to transform. And then by the 2000s, once we'd gotten past the Y2K issue, and we had a Y2K czar and John Koskinen, we started looking at the president's management agenda under the Bush administration for how do you use technology to deliver services, the eGov initiatives that each agency was asked to stand up to make government services more affordable, accessible, to deliver actual government services online. But one of the things, though, that I think has lagged is the use of technology on the open government space. And this should be so easy. I mean, you're not delivering a product or service. You're just providing something the American people should have, which is a line of sight and transparency into what records are being kept, what data and information is being used to, in essence, run the government and to justify policy choices. And technology can do that very easily. And I think the reason why we're not using it is because there is a resistance in government to sharing information and being open.
So I'm sorry, it was the
Clinger-Cohen.
Clinger-Cohen.
Yeah, Senator Cohen and Congressman Clinger in the 1990s passed this important piece of legislation. It was one of the first laws on information technology usage in the federal government.
And was that when you were at the performance?
That's when I worked on government reform issues on Capitol Hill. Okay. And again, we worked closely with the Reinventing Government team that Al Gore had set up. Gore had decided, I think as a mistake, to set up NPR, National Partnership for Reinventing Government, outside of the Office of Management and Budget. They had their own offices, their own teams, their own manuals and policy and ideas. My view, and I think many agree, is that you have to link management reform to the budget. It's the golden rule. If you tie something to money, it'll get done in government. And so by divorcing management reform from OMB, I think that was a critical mistake in the Clinton administration. And then in the Bush administration, the goal was to try to fuse management reform with budget decisions. I think that ultimately is good as long as you also have congressional buy-in for some of those management changes. One of the big obstacles that we're seeing is that an administration, the Obama administration, has several management initiatives as well. An administration can offer ideas on how to manage the departments, but if that's not also reinforced from Congress, if Congress, in terms of appropriations and authorization of programs, isn't supporting that, then you have basically mixed signals, and the bureaucracy waits out the administration and says, well, you're going to go in 4 years. Or the political appointees change every 2 years, pretty much. This is the cycle. So career staff who have to implement e-government projects will kind of wait out the administration, and so you don't see a whole lot of traction on
It's
that.
interesting that you say that, because it sounds like you think that the people in the departments are going to be very opposed to instituting new tools and new systems. Do you think that's a universal, or is there a way to bring those people who are in the departments, who obviously have knowledge about how things should work, to bring them in and get them working towards more efficient and more technological government?
That was the whole concept behind Performance Institute, and the goal there was, in a non-threatening way, approach government managers and say, hey, there are ideas on how you can improve the management of your programs. And yes, we're going to talk about the politics of what OMB wants and what the Hill is doing, but mainly we want to give you tools that will improve your ability to manage your program and to not just comply, but to actually improve performance. And so we always approached it that way, and the goal was to identify how, on a career level, civil service level, things were happening that then you could have peer-to-peer learning. But I do think that we've not seen enough interest on the part of Congress, and this has always been my criticism in both Democrat and Republican congressional regimes, is that members of Congress are about policy. They're not a whole lot about oversight and evaluation of programs. It's very rare. And the only time that you see that happening is when there's a scandal. And they say, oh, gosh, we just found this out. So, we're on it. Let's have oversight hearings. Well, we have this entire set of programs in every department that you should evaluate, perhaps even once every 5 years. And we've got the great support organization called the General Accounting Office, and every department has an inspector general. So that's going to be important, is congressional oversight. But back to open government, having these records available allow citizens to perform their own level of oversight.
We can all do our own
and members of the media. So, this was a frustrating thing for me in city council. As a member of the city council, I sometimes did not feel that I could get information. And my collaborator on open government, Donna Fry, felt the same way, as though, we were trying to get information. In San Diego, we have the Public Records Act request process. But if you don't ask the question exactly the right way, then you may not get the answer that you're looking for. And they also then turn around and say, well, certain records are not subject to the PRA process. My view is, and I've always done this in my office, and I challenge anyone to come up with an example where it hadn't happened. If someone asks for public records, I search my private emails. My view on a public record is, whether it was sent from a government server or a private server, if the record related to my duties to vote on something as a council member, government services, it's a public record, period, end of story. But right now, the PRA is very narrowly written to say that it has to originate from a government server to be classified as a government document. I think that we need to have a challenge in court on that, and if necessary, an amendment to the law. My view has always been, no matter what tool you utilize, if it relates to your official business, if it's a matter that you're voting on, it's a government or ministerial document, no matter where it originated, whether it's on the back of a napkin or it's on AOL as an email system.
So with that in mind, rather than have the PRA process at all, I think what a lot of us want to do is just get these things out in the open.
Put it online. Yeah.
So, why not have email automatically released to the public without a PRA even needed?
I think that if we could provide the technology to allow for universal searches, I think that because it is a government undertaking, I think that that's something that we should consider. My open government plan has always included taking out of the hands of managers the compliance on these issues. And so in the city of San Diego, I said the city auditor should be in charge of the PRAs. And that if the department isn't providing information, the auditor will go and say, we're the auditors, we're just going to take the information and we're going to comply with the request. In the federal government, I'd like to see that responsibility for the FOIA process transferred to inspector generals. The reason why this is so important is that in this administration, and let me be very careful to say, the prior administrations failed, I believe, on FOIA as well, and these games are played in every administration. But this administration came in committing to full transparency, and we have not seen that. And so what I want to see is a process where there's a timeline, where there's clear standards for whether a document can be withheld, and that we remove the conflict of interest in providing an ombudsman for FOIA in each department, and that should be the Inspector General. I've also proposed that Congress live under the FOIA law as well. And this is going to be very hard. People say, well, members of Congress don't want you to know who they're meeting with. Well, I think that would be quite enlightening. Who are you meeting with? And, what are the documents, the source documents that you're using to craft legislation? What are your constituents saying about their challenges and their issues in the district? These are issues that, again, should be done in an open platform. And Congress, if Congress feels that we should have FOIA for the executive branch, we should also live under the same laws in the legislative branch.
Makes sense to me. I want to go back to your time on the city council. You did one thing with technology in particular that sticks in my mind, the pothole app.
No, it's not the pothole app.
Not the
People
pothole.
say it's the pothole app because one of the services was pothole. But if you take a look at San Diego 311 and what we did is we looked at every city service. The funniest one was we had dead animal removal on there, and someone took a picture of certain city council members and submitted them as dead animal removal. But look, when I proposed that, the city bureaucracy was furious. Originally, my proposal was a 311 CRM package for, in the early 2000s, I said, look, we have all these call centers. We use different CRM packages. Why don't we have one telephone number, 311, one CRM package, and then online, people can go take a ticket number and see where their request is. Well, by 2009, when I was in office, my idea was leaped by technology, because now we had a mobile platform, and it allowed us to use GPS so that if you have a leaky fire hydrant, or you have a pothole, or you have graffiti was a big one. We got a lot of graffiti requests. You can take a picture, and then the technology allows us to know down to the foot where you were standing, and then you can upload that. The other thing I liked about the San Diego 311 is that you could open it up and find out who else in your neighborhood reported problems, and you got to see the pictures that they took, and you got to see the status of what was going on. So it was all public? It was all public, and so if you have graffiti on a wall, and it was reported 6 months ago, and then 5 or 6 other people also reported it, wouldn't you like to know which department that's sitting on, what desk, that's sitting on? And so San Diego 311, we did it for $9,000. I cut my own budget in my council office to pay for that. And in 6 months' time, the first 6 months of the app, we did more cases in my office with just 2 field reps as the entire city council had done in the previous 3 years combined. In 6 months' time. Now, the bureaucracy was like, you're flooding us with requests and tickets. And my response was, well, that's what we're here for. The problems are still there whether they go reported or not. What San Diego 311 did was it allowed us to give an easier tool for the constituents to let us know where we need to be doing a better job. The first thing Bob Filner did when he got into office was he shut off San Diego 311.
So, question about it. I heard, once somebody submitted, I understand it sent an email to your office, is that correct? Is that how the workflow happened?
The way it was explained to me, because I'm not a techie myself, I'm just looking at how we transform and how we use good ideas. The city's system, its CRM system, was not prepared to integrate. So my 2 field reps basically took the information and then uploaded it into the system using Excel, and there had to be a human interface. But it also allowed us to go through and to see each week what cases were assigned and then follow up. There has to be some level of human interaction. As part of my plans for the city as a hopeful mayor, we had committed that we would implement the entire program, which would have included 1 telephone number, 1 CRM system, and the mobile app being fully integrated. But as one member of the city council, we did a pretty damn good job
So the CRM system that the city does have, and the fact that essentially you had to have people doing something a machine can do. Obviously, there's a value to human oversight, but
Well, because
data
the
entry-
administration made it quite clear they would not integrate. They made it quite clear that they were unwilling to integrate the tool. And so we said, we still think that the mobile app is so important, and we were right, because look at the number of cases that we were able to do. I was also proud of the fact that our road repair rallies became the model for now what we're doing in the city. I announced that we would have, using our cell phone apps and also pen and paper for people who aren't so good with the cell phone, that we would announce a date certain that we would have a bunch of people show up to walk one neighborhood to look for potholes. And then we submitted all of those that week. And of course, the city work crews were really apprehensive when we announced these, we called them road repair rallies. Well, they came back to us and they said, it's made our work crews far more efficient because now we got a bunch of pothole requests all in the same community, and it allows us to go and do it far more efficiently. The city has now learned, and as part of the infrastructure improvements that they announced just a few months ago, the city now uses this localized, focused approach to taking a look at road repairs, and they have a schedule for doing that region by region.
So I want to focus a little bit more on this CRM system the city has, and really just sort of a lot of issues that I've been seeing with the city technology. And you were just a council member, you didn't control the whole thing, so I'm certainly not going to put it all at your doorstep. But the city has been horrible at IT procurement. And
Absolutely.
Certainly not the city, the state, the federal government.
Take a look at Data Processing Corporation, and that's why I called for us to do something about that in 2004. Now, my view was I thought we should have sold DPC because it's an asset. It has equipment. It has, more importantly, workers. As a workforce. And so my original proposal was we should divest ourselves of DPC and make a profit off of
We
it.
should probably give people a quick sense of what
San
DPC
Diego Data Processing Corporation. So in the 1970s, late 70s, the city came up with a pretty neat idea. And it said, what we're going to do is we are going to spin off a nonprofit. That nonprofit will be a contractor to us to provide our IT services. And basically what they wanted to do, I think a number of reasons why they wanted to get outside of the city procurement and HR policies. If they're a nonprofit, they get to hire quickly, they get to contract quickly.
A lot more flexibility.
Cut through the red tape. So it totally understood. The other thing that they had proposed is that this nonprofit, wholly owned by the city of San Diego, would then not only provide services to us, but they would then be a contractor to go out and make a profit from other regional governments in San Diego, and that the profits would be used for us.
Great idea.
Fast forward. Well, the culture didn't quite get that, and so they got one or two small, tiny contracts, but nothing real of substantial nature. So we didn't make any money off of this thing. But what they did do is they used it as a shell game in the budget process, where they overcharged enterprise funds for their IT, water department, wastewater department, where they could just raise your fees. And then they transferred the money to the departments where they couldn't raise your taxes, which are the general fund departments, to offset their budget shortfall. Shell game. And so by the end of this process, I think DPC ultimately, on one level got a bad rap because they were being accused of having higher prices than they should. But what was happening is that the city managers were using DPC to overcharge departments to run a surplus, and then they would find money at the end of the budget year to say, oh, look at, we have a budget shortfall, but we found a little money here, and here's some extra money for some of these pet projects. I think that the way in which DPC was spun off was wrong. I would have still proceeded forward with awarding a 30-year contract to DPC so that it was a revenue stream that you can then sell that corporation for profit, take the profit, put it back into the city, and then have a 30-year master service arrangement and contract with the successor firm. Instead, the city just decided, in essence, to shut it down and then award contracts outside the process. So yes, you're absolutely right. There are better ways to do the IT. And IT has always been a challenge for private sector organizations as it has for government. It's just that because we don't have Darwin helping us out in government, to constantly push us to compete and to be more efficient. Good management is hard in government. When you find a well-managed program, it deserves a lot of credit because Darwin was not helping that along. It took conscious effort. It took real strategy to make that happen.
So they ended up basically splitting DPC into three parts.
And contracting it all out.
Contracting it out, including to now infamous CGI.
The exchange, the Obamacare exchange provider.
Now, I don't remember how you voted on that contract. Did you vote for it?
Ultimately, I voted with my commentary regarding my reservations about, I think there's a better way to do this. When presented with the savings, I said, all right, if this is what this administration is able to achieve, let's bank the savings and move forward.
Do you now regret that you voted for CGI?
I don't regret the savings that we achieved. I think that, when you hold someone accountable, you'll get good results. Clearly, the administration did not hold this contractor accountable for the other project, which was the Obamacare exchanges.
So, going to Congress, do you think CGI should ever get another contract from the federal government?
They were a colossal failure when it came to the Obamacare website, and I would also say the administration shares in that failure. You've got the contractor, and then you have the project or program manager, and both have to be held accountable. My view on the Obamacare exchanges, and I think this will come as a surprise to some folks, I would keep the exchanges. But I would spin them off into the private sector. Let the private sector manage and maintain the transactions. I don't think the government should have been in the website building business. And I don't think that government should be in the healthcare transaction business. That's something the private sector should use. But the benefit of the exchanges is that you're able to solve a flaw in the market, which is, as a small business owner, I always was shocked by the healthcare rates that we were charged. When I had 10 employees, on a per person basis, it was pretty expensive. By the time we had 180 employees, I was actually paying less per employee even 3 years later. That's the market basically saying that larger companies are going to be given a discount. So I would keep the exchanges, but would make sure that the website as well as the transaction processing of the purchases of healthcare would be spun off into privately managed, privately conducted transactions.
So I got to re-ask my question.
Yeah.
Do you think CGI should ever get another federal contract?
I'm going to take a wait-and-see approach to who gets contracts. I don't think that you have Congress decide on contracts. You have the administration decide on those contracts.
Do you think it should be easier on the federal level to disqualify contractors?
You always want to look at past performance. But again, that's an administration decision.
So in looking at IT contracting on every level of government, that's actually one of the problems that I've seen is past performance is one of the biggest criteria in awarding contract. So the companies that get contracts.
It is a big criteria. It's a lot bigger than it used to be, which is a good thing. But you also have the issue of best value. You've got your cost and your performance evaluation that you want to look for.
Well, so if your
past performance is also future performance. It's what are you willing to provide our agency? What performance standards will you maintain and achieve? Past performance can be indicative of whether you feel that they can actually, pull it off. But performance-based contracting, which came about in the 1990s, Al Berman, one of my supporters and great guy, was former OFPP administrator, Office of Federal Procurement Policy, pushed performance-based contracting in the federal level. And we need to be embracing more of those models of fixed price, performance guarantee contracting with warranties, standards, and past performance evaluation can certainly be one of the factors you use to award. But it also should be looking at what's the price and what are the performance guarantees that you're going to get from the contractor.
So the problem I've seen is that if you're looking at for paving a street or building a building, that's something that hasn't changed much in the last 30, 40, maybe roughly 100 years. Technology, IT, changes incredibly quickly. So if you're going with a company with 20 years of technology experience, they're doing things the same way they've been doing for 20 years, you're getting a really bad product. You're getting something. Are you familiar with Moore's Law? It has to do with processing power, roughly
Okay.
that it doubles every year and a half. So if you're looking at 4-year-old technology, you're looking at something that's roughly 10 times too expensive. So how do we start saying, wait, we don't want the companies with lots of experience. We want the young, agile companies who are doing things in new, cheaper, faster ways.
You're going to find, if you have performance-based contracting in the federal government, that you're going to find that the market's going to start breaking through some of those barriers for us. More importantly, when you continue to emphasize small business goals, which is something I'm very supportive of, the big guys aren't going to be able to get as many of those contracts. And so when I was on the Federal Acquisition Reform Commission, one of the big things that we were looking at was how do we actually true up the achievement of small business targets for each agency? How do we make sure that we prevent these primes from using a small business as a shell to then turn around and take all the work? And there are real significant problems there. And one of the things, again, as a management geek, as a member of Congress, I think I can probably be a very powerful voice in asking tough questions of deputy secretaries, of making sure that we get the management teams in for our oversight hearings. It probably will bore some of my colleagues, I get it, but this is important stuff because this is where policy translates into actual implementation. Management capabilities, the decisions these agencies are making. Do you have a proper acquisition workforce? Do you have a proper project management culture so that you can manage important technology projects? Those are two critical issues. If you don't have good contracting processes and management as well as program abilities, it doesn't matter who your contractor is, you can end up having pretty bad results. Those are the issues that are not sexy, but those are issues that Congress ought to be asking about.
So I want to change gears here a little bit and ask you about going to DC and your colleagues in Congress. I think you and I are probably pretty similar politically.
I'm a centrist as well.
Centrist, liberal on social issues, conservative on economic issues.
Responsible and accepting. Let's get past some of the labels when the people say, well, you're socially liberal. I'm socially accepting. I'm fiscally responsible. Let's get past the liberal conservative dynamics, and I think you're going to find when you talk about where your positions are, you'll find a lot more common ground even between the two parties.
So this is I think there's a lot of us in San Diego. DC seems like it's obviously has people from all around the country, but apart from all those other things, you also seem very focused on facts, on what is the reality. Now let's analyze this based on what does work, what doesn't work. And there seems to be a culture in DC almost of, for lack of a better phrase, playing politics with the truth.
People say if you'll believe it when you see it. Some people in politics see it when they believe it. And that's the thing that we have to battle against is it can be very frustrating. It can be very damaging to not only policies that we're trying to iron out and get right, but the people's lives.
So how are you going to do that? How are you going to bring some of the people who, some of your colleagues who deny climate change and want to micromanage scientists and won't and those of us in technology, we have the same thing every day with clients who are trying to explain them that no, this is a hard technological problem. This is an easy one.
Yeah.
The almost
you have to try to appeal to them kind of where they are. Let me talk to you about two conversations I had, both on pension reform. One was January 2009. I was in office for a month. Firefighters Union opposed me, attacked me when I ran for city council. They actually ran a firefighter.
Yeah, you were running against a firefighter. Let's be fair.
No. They put a firefighter in the race because my other opponents had dropped out. So they come in, and I got Alan Alvarado and Frank DeClerc and a couple other guys there, and I said, look, thanks for taking this meeting. I want to talk about pension reform. We got some of the pleasantries out of the way, which was real quick with the fire union. And I said, look, we're going to have to shut down the pension system. We're going to have to move to defined contributions. We're going to have to deal with the current liabilities by finding some way to reform existing benefits for employees. Current retirees, I don't think we're going to be able to touch that legally, but we're going to have to go after both existing employee benefits and reform those, as well as new hires. That's the reality, because we're not sustainable. There's no mathematical way to solve this, to drag it out. My only question to you is, how painful are you going to make it, and how long are you going to force it to take? They didn't like that. But in the end, that's where we ended up. And it was relatively painful for the city. When I went to the police union, I had the same message of we need to work on pension reform. And I talked to board members in the unions and as well as members. I'll always stop city employees and I'll talk to them about their job. And of course, pensions come up and, why do you want to take my pension away? And why do you, hate firefighters or whatnot? And I'd say, come on, here's why I'm doing this, because I want to know that your retirement is secure. And I kept going back to, is there any area where we have common ground? They want to have secure retirements. They want to make sure we recruit and retain, they say, that we can recruit and retain more talent. We talked about flexible, benefit packages and being able to have more take-home pay when you have an opt-out program and a hybrid model. Covered all the ground, and for some folks, they were open to it. They don't want the benefits to go away. The funniest thing was finally when we sat down at the bargaining table in August of 2012, when my initiative passed, the unions that had spent months demanding Social Security, demanding it. You don't put Social Security in there. And I said all along, I'm going to let the unions decide whether they want to go back into Social Security. And what we're doing is we're capping our exposure and our contribution. But this is something that's subject to meet and confer. I want them to be able to be part of it. When we sat down, initially they said we want Social Security plus 401k. And I said, wait. I want to show you the facts. The actuaries are going to come in and show you if we give you a 3% 401k plus a 6.2% fixed annuity, or even a 9.2% 401k. Over 30 years, here's what the replacement ratio would be for your income when you retire. And the goal was to get to 65%, which is what the experts say. Well, we got to 72% under that model. We then said, all right, now we're going to simulate it based on Social Security. 47% was what they achieved. And then I kind of said, by the way, this assumes that the politicians keep their end of the bargain. Do you really want to make that bet? Every single one of the unions took those numbers to their members and came back saying, we don't want to be part of Social Security. In fact, Ben Hueso tried carrying a bill. I think he actually passed it, but we blew it out in court. He carried a bill, and the unions locally originally supported the bill, mandating that we go to Social Security. And then when they saw the numbers, they flipped on him and opposed the bill, saying, no, let us figure this out locally. And ultimately, we reached unanimous agreement and implemented our labor contract in August of 2012. I was willing to talk to the unions and appeal to them based upon what I thought they were interested in and try to get facts to them. My opponent's running a spliced video of me talking to the Tea Party. If you watch the full video, this is what I said. I stood up there and I said, I want to talk to you about the most important issue facing our city. And I believe that instead of focusing on all these other issues, that your best impact can be locally. I need your help for pension reform. Now, I told that to Democrat groups, I told that to Latino groups, I told that to Asian Pacific Islander groups. My message is the same no matter what my audience is, which is, here's this challenge called pension reform. And I'm going to provide you some evidence and data as to why I think you should be interested in it, and I need your help. And let's get this done. I'm willing to work with anyone. I'll go to the Skyline Church, Jim Garlow, who's saying that I'm unfit for office because I'm gay. I'm willing to show up at Skyline and be present. Why? Because I believe that some people might change their views on gay people if they see myself and my partner having a loving relationship, being normal. Giving people that information and saying, look, we have family values too. And you say you're for family values. So I have no problem going into the belly of the beast and trying to find common ground and saying, here's some things that we can work on. Donna Fry and I disagree on a lot of issues, but we agree strongly on open government issues. It's one of the first things I reached out to her on, and we got a lot done together. Donna Fry and I also agreed that the downtown redevelopment agencies were taking more than their fair share, and it was time for them to pay back. And when people, belittled us for our reforms, even some of my biggest backers that I had to take on in the development community, the new City Hall project, defunding CCDC on some of these big projects, they opposed both of us, but we were successful in advancing it. Again, I look not for where we disagree. I look for some things that we may agree on and then try to marshal some data to convince people that, yes, this is in alignment with the goals that you're trying to achieve on these issues. We can disagree on 80% of things, but if we agree on 20%, why don't we just check the box and get the 20% done? That's the philosophy I hope to see in Washington. So a long response to your question of how am I going to try to engage in Washington is I'm going to try to take that same approach to engaging people on where we do agree and saying, if we agree on these issues, let's just get them done. We'll fight about the rest later, but let's get these things done.
I was afraid this was going to happen. We're having too good of a conversation. We're running tight on time.
Sorry about that.
So I'm going to ask you a couple things, some of the big tech issues on the federal level, and as
I'll be quiet. I'll be very short.
Yeah, let's try and do one sentence response to these. The mass surveillance by the
I'm
CIA.
opposed to it. You have the constitutional right to due process. And look, a judge will offer a search warrant based on the scantiest of evidence. So I want to make sure that people have to get a search warrant in the federal government before they look at your emails or your cell phone records.
And what about metadata, so-called metadata?
The data analytics and the metadata, again, I just don't believe that that is a tool that should be used without some sort of search warrant, some sort of stricter criteria.
Okay. Net neutrality.
100% for net neutrality, and I'm not going to waffle on it or send code words like my opponent.
Use of open source in government.
I'm still trying to figure out where we go on that front, but I think that I'm inclined to support it.
We'll have a longer conversation after the election.
All right.
Digital rights management.
Digital rights management, is that copyright and whatnot?
Basically, building into devices copyright protections and controlling the ability to, say, freely share a document,
Well, I'm a big
song.
property rights guy, and so I want to make sure that we don't infringe upon property rights. That's important to me.
Okay. We'll have a further conversation
All
about
right.
that one, too. And then finally, scientific research that the government pays for, making it openly available.
Why not? It's taxpayer-funded research.
That's a very good question.
All right. Was that a trick one?
It shouldn't be, but it's Congress. So the last thing I want to ask, and then I wanted to leave some time for questions, was you've talked a lot about openness, you've talked a lot about transparency, you've talked about making yourself available to everybody, which made me feel much less excited about getting you to come here. I no longer feel special. But
All right.
But your own experiences on the council in this race, I've heard that you've been not totally accessible to the press.
Well, there's a difference. I'm accessible to my constituents, and I want to make sure that my constituents get honest, unbiased information. And what we've been able to do in this digital age is provide information to individuals, to constituents, in a far more powerful way by going door to door, by holding town halls and community coffees, and being accessible over email. We work very hard in my team, and I pride myself on the fact that I'm always out there. If you have a media outlet that simply cannot demonstrate that they're interested in providing fair and balanced coverage, then we've got to prioritize that. And I don't regret that, because I want to make sure that when people hear from me, that they know, okay, this is a reputable news source that is going to provide the facts in a balanced way. Otherwise, in this new technology age, and I love the fact that this is happening, in this new technology age, people are able to get information directly from the source. They can go to my website. They can go to my community coffee. They can talk to me in a teletown hall. They have the ability to actually get actual source data, and that's, I think, transformative. Now, a lot of old media companies are not liking that. They feel that they are the arbiters of what the public needs to know. I disagree. If we have a media outlet that's fair and honest in their reporting, they will always get a priority response from us. If you have a media outlet that's just muckraking and not interested in the truth, then, I've got to prioritize our team's time in terms of making sure that our constituents get full information, factual information.
So I won't ask you to name names about who's muckraking in town, but it does raise one last question before I open it up to
Do you think that the public doesn't get that there's a media bias? I think they all get it. And so what we try to do, and you're never going to like all your stories. I can guarantee you no one's always going to like all their stories. And I'll see a story from a news outlet that we're like, we don't really think that they're too balanced. And I'll say, wow, that surprised me. It was a very balanced story. And so, we look at each story one by one. Nobody has a complete blanket, we don't work with these groups. But we look at the story, the nature of the story, kind of the angle that they're going for, the type of reporter that we're working with, and we say, okay, let's engage on this story because we feel that this is a topic that this news organization is legitimately trying to cover in a fair, transparent, and open way.
And there's certainly, I love the internet. I love the ability to have conversations. I've had several conversations with you over Twitter. I think you and Lorena Gonzalez are the two most active and engaging politicians locally on Twitter, and that's great. But I also see that a lot of that stuff tends to be very superficial. It can get very nasty. And
my staff really like me staying off of Twitter, by the way. Some of our tweets are pre-programmed, and it's basically us saying here's some important issues that we're trying to raise. We want to drive the debate on these issues. And so you have pre-programmed use of social media. But then also there's interaction. Well, I'll see something that's unique, that's something that I'm interested in, that I want to interact with directly. I author all of our tweets. They propose them, and the staff know kind of what I want to say. I don't write every single tweet that's put out, but I write about probably 50% of them. Yeah, about 50% of them. The rest are, here are the issues I want to advance. Make sure that you draft it in a way that reflects my position. Thus far, we haven't had any embarrassing tweets, but I'm sure, I'm sure in time it will happen. And you know what? That's part of it. When you're working in a large organization, you want to make sure that you give people flexibility and freedom, and from time to time they'll make mistakes. But we're a learning organization, and I've always established that as, try new things. I want you to be empowered to do your job.
Well, I really should. I have lots more questions, but let me open it up to the audience. Questions about technology, about open
government? And I need to make sure that you get me on time, right? Okay, good.
Go for it.
Go ahead.
So we talk about open government data, open government public oversight over government operations. With your time and experience on the city council, it's all well and good to say that you just want to open a big portal and let people go in and plumb for the data that they find is important in government. And there's also some functions of government that need to be not public. Somebody sues the city because a cop did something inappropriate.
All of those things are already protected from. It's pre-decisional information, and we have standards in place to address that issue.
Are there conversations, say, between council members or between council members and departments? Are the messages covering those subjects existing in the city email system, where there'd be some complexity and try to keep things partitioned? Or
no.
If there is a portal into the city, a data portal into the city, there's literally no risk to having things that need to remain confidential.
We can work out protocols, all right, and you don't have to go full bore overnight. We can create, a wave of implementation milestones. But, for example, my Sunshine Act that passed in October of 2012 required employee compensation to be posted online. It required contracts to be posted online, the number of bids received, because I was very interested in making sure that, are we giving no bid contracts? Are we giving one bid, or small bids? Are we getting small business to be participating or veterans to be participating? So getting the contracting information posted online. I really pushed hard to get schedules posted online, but my colleagues didn't want to go that far. And so it's always, I think that when you talk about open government, you don't have to have it 100% overnight. What you can do is say, okay, here are thoughtful things to implement and make accessible online. Let's evaluate the use of it. Let's evaluate what potential roadblocks we have, and then we can continue to make improvements from there.
Yes.
Hi, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Congressman Peters last night. So some argue that some amount of closed door deals are necessary in government in order to move forward with legislative action. I use the example of the Constitutional Convention. The public accepted some degree of secrecy during the time of the Constitutional Convention. So do you think that argument still holds in the current political environment, current political climate?
Not really. So part of what I'm doing with Fix Congress First is that we have the single subject rule. A lot of times the issue is shrouded and there's no transparency or accountability because something's buried in a bill. So single subject rule would require that we vote on each bill one by one. Here's another open government issue. Access to floor time and being able to call a vote. Right now, you have Harry Reid, who's Mr. Obama's veto. And then you have Boehner in the House Republican leadership, who is Mr. Obama's roadblock. Both sides basically hold hostage bills from the other chamber. ENDA is important to me. I want to get that done. I think if we called ENDA up for a vote, it would pass. I think if you called a bunch of bills up for a vote on the House floor, they would all pass. But because one side wants to hold that issue hostage to get 100% of what they want on something else or 100% of their direction on that issue, neither chamber really is open. So I'm proposing that we lower the threshold for floor consideration to 25% of the members supporting a bill. If you have 25% of the members supporting a bill, you get 15 minutes of floor time and a recorded vote. I don't fear debating something I don't agree with. I don't fear voting against it. But I should agree that I would defend your right to offer the idea. That's open government. That's going to be really hard for me to get done. I get it.
I'm trying to decide, how do you get that to a vote?
But you know what? But laying it out there and saying, look, we have gridlock in Washington. You guys are at 7% approval ratings. It sounds like you really need to have an extreme makeover. And part of that is opening up your process for people being able to offer ideas. Another issue is making sure that legislation is posted for real online 72 hours ahead of time so we can, at least the public can read the bill first. So these are all things that I believe will open up the process so that you don't have that backroom dealing that's always going on. And that people have trust and confidence that they're seeing all the issues in public light before people are making decisions.
One more question back
The
here.
mayor has announced a big website redesign initiative for the city, and I'm wanting to get your thoughts on how you think the website can do a better job for all of its stakeholders and what you see as some of the potential barriers of getting the best job done. We mentioned CGI and how the debacle with the Obamacare website, and you mentioned $9,000 to develop the 311 app, which was pretty successful, but
Yeah.
knowing that couldn't integrate with...
I drive a hard bargain.
Yeah.
At first, they asked for $50,000, and I'm like, no, you're not getting that. And they wanted that annually, and I negotiated. I'm glad that they're doing the website project in the city. It's long overdue. The city's been a laggard when it comes to embracing e-commerce. But what I want to do is think about this. Don't build a website to take your brick and mortar process and digitize it. No. Rethink your process to deploy it on the internet. The big mistake I've seen in a lot of e-government projects is that they try mapping their existing workflow and then taking that and presenting some sort of portal into that. It's our mess for less, in essence, is the online project. Fix your brick and mortar process and then use the internet to paradigm leap that process and to deliver the service faster, better, cheaper. My hope is that they have that philosophy on this web project as they're going forward. And you don't have to do the entire set of city services overnight. You can do it piecemeal, department by department. One last question?
I got one thing. So back to federal issues.
Yeah.
You mentioned you're in support of net neutrality, and forget all the many things that fall under the umbrella. What everybody's focused on net neutrality right now is the FCC considering whether they're going to use their powers to regulate the internet like a utility. That's under consideration right now, and it's the next thing going. And when you say you are in favor of net neutrality, it would be very easy for someone to hear you saying, I think that the FCC should regulate the internet like a utility. Is that your position, or do you have a more nuanced approach?
I don't believe that we should see competitors putting their thumb on the scale on the internet to basically monetize access to content. And whatever legislation or whatever rulemaking needs to occur to prevent that from happening, I would support. I think there's a number of different avenues to get there, and so the goal is net neutrality. My commitment's net neutrality. As a Republican, I think that's kind of unique from what I'm hearing from some of my colleagues, and I kind of sit back and say, well, if we're for free markets, free minds, this should be an easy one. This should be kind of in our wheelhouse, in our philosophy. But then again, on the social issues, they don't seem to be free markets, free minds on that. So I think we have some philosophical consistencies to try to work out. Assuming we have a Republican majority in the House and the Senate, this is going to be important for me to take on as one of the freedom issues that I think I'll be successful in advancing a case on.
Carl, thank you so much.
Thanks for the invite. Thanks for the invite, and don't be shy about offering ideas. And some of these topics I'm still trying to grapple with, and I don't really have a specific step-by-step plan on how I'd like to proceed on them. But as you come up with ideas, if you see things in the federal government that either on a technology basis or open government basis, you think that I can be helpful in being a champion on, don't assume I know about it. Probably I don't. So bring it to my attention, let me know, tweet at me, email me, and I'd be happy to take the idea under consideration. Thank you.